All right, moving on to the third function, the relief function. We're halfway through, also known as the tertiary function. The tertiary function is the consequence of the auxiliary function being positioned as it is. For the INTP, then, introverted and sensation to complement the extroverted and intuition of the second function. It's the oddball in the conscious stack. It's generally the last conscious function to differentiate itself because there's less direct pressure on it, pretty much than any other conscious function. It's used recreationally, hence the name relief, and is not considered to be a centrally important focus in life, which can sometimes unnerve the introverted sensing dominance in the case of the INTP, or whoever's dominant in your relief function. For other types, for INTPs, it would be the ISFJ and INFJ. They might not take introverted thinking or logic as seriously as we think that they ought to. Less stressful than the inferior function, the third function, as less emphasis and pressure are placed on the counterpart of it, the second function, as opposed to the dominant function. And in general, the INTP puts less emphasis on perception, so we don't really we're not driven by perception, so it's unimportant when things go wrong in the field of sensation or introverted sensation in general. And we'll talk about the picture of extroverted sensation when we do the shadow functions video. It operates as a support, and it also, in my opinion, forms an important check for the operations of the top two functions. So in the INTP's case, do the facts match up with our sort of flights of fancy that might be coming from introverted thinking? In the case of when I was talking about, there's sort of two ways to test a thing, actively or passively. Passively, it's obvious maybe that introverted sensation, be like, what are the facts? What has been done? What is the history of this? But actively, introverted sensing are sort of the consequence of the extroverted intuition activity. So it's the data that we get by forming that experiment with our creative function. That's introverted sensing content. Another way experiencing it, to narrow in on introverted sensing more, is, and I've argued with this about a lot of people, is proprioception, our sense of our own body, our inner sense of self, our physical sensation. Is this denim soft? Is this sweater itchy? Is it too hot in this room? Our body state, our inner sensations. So it would be very hard for me to explain to you how pain feels to me. It would be very hard for me to really impart to you what the sensation of tasting something sweet is like, or tasting something salty. I think it was like, in The Matrix, the smell, if there is such a thing. He doesn't believe, the agent doesn't believe or doesn't know about these kinds of introverted sensing things because there's nothing objective about it. My girlfriend hates tomatoes. I like tomatoes. Now, if she were able to somehow give me her experience of tomatoes, would it be identical as my experience, or would it be a different experience? These are unanswerable questions because introverted sensing is introverted. And like all introverted functions, it cannot be expressed directly. I think that's important to pay attention to. And it will always confound people's efforts, I think, ultimately, to try to define all of the functions objectively, and thus define types objectively, because there's a half and half component here. That's one of the lessons of Jung, is we do have to pay attention to the subjective as well as the objective. It's more focused, introverted sensing, on what something is doing to the subject than sensory extroversion, the extroverted counterpart, which focuses on what something does or is doing or can do, not on what has been done. Introverted sensing also gets tied into the idea of the past and so forth. And it's true that something has to have happened for you to have an experience of it, to compare it to other things. But introverted intuition does not work so differently. It kind of works with the past and projects it forward into a creative picture of what could come in the future, but we're getting into other stuff. Introverted sensing contents are connected by extroverted intuition associations and conceptions, but they are the actual and not the conceptual or the possible or the potential. That's the realm of intuition. The impressions of introverted sensing can be quite abstract, as I said before, but they are caused by actual things that really happened, or even present realities, not just past things. It's, again, because it's a relief function for INTPs, not actually taken very seriously and often is indulged in focusing on it too much or being forced to focus on it too much seems like a mundanity, and it can get exhausting pretty quickly. So that's introverted sensing briefly. Hopefully, if you have any other questions about any of this, obviously comments below if I skip anything or skip over anything too quickly, or I need to do a deep dive in another video entirely. Final point on the inferior function, or the fourth function. It's been given a lot of other names and a lot of other titles.